more on the energy crisis. We're joined by Arjun, Flora, Director, Europe Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis. Good to see you. Thank you and welcome to the show. You know, if this was 6 months ago, we'd be screaming right now about how Europe is going to starve from the shortage of energy and people would freeze to death, essentially. And that's certainly not the case. We've had a warmer winter. There's been a plethora of supplies. But most importantly, the price of both crude oil and nat gas have fallen dramatically. What happened?
Yes, Philip, thanks for having me on the show. So as you said, we've had a really mild winter here in Europe, especially over the last month. 8 countries recorded record temperatures on New Year's Day, not so long ago, at around 20 degrees Celsius. That's about 68 degrees Fahrenheit for your viewers. So what all of this means is that European nations have not had to burn as much gas or just use as much energy to heat homes. So many of these fears that people had about blackouts, about freezing conditions, thankfully they haven't come to pass.
The rationing, the worrying, all of this, I don't want to say it didn't have a big impact because we still see elevated prices of electricity in places, for example, in France. But I have to give credit to all these different countries who seemingly work together to reduce their energy usage. Would you consider that reaction or preventative measure as successful and having a very large impact on what we're seeing today?
For sure, it's contributed. It's difficult to say how much of an impact that has had versus simply the high prices. There has definitely been a lot of price-driven demand destruction happening in Europe. But since August, gas consumption has been down 20% compared to the previous 5 years average, and so that is definitely a combination of high prices, but also, as you mentioned, some of these measures that have been implemented.
And from Russia's perspective, I mean, they would have benefited had prices stayed high. Now, I get they can't sell it at the highest price, but they still would have benefited. And part of the strategy was potentially having Europe face the consequences of having less or no Russian gas. And this essentially has not worked out in President Putin's favor, correct?
Correct. Thanks to a combination of those factors, the price-driven demand destruction, the measures that were implemented, but of course, this mild winter has really been a boon for millions of us here in Europe.
So here's the billion-dollar question: does Europe need Russia? Because discussing this as we are right now, it seems to me they did just fine. But somewhere, I'm sure it's more complicated than that.
Well, it is. Europe has been paying a lot of money for this gas. They've been paying through their teeth, and governments have been effectively printing money and borrowing in some cases to fund national subsidization programs to protect consumers and businesses against the high prices. That's not sustainable. That can't be repeated. So that's got us through the last 12 months, but now going forward, we really need to have other solutions in place.
What are these other solutions you are addressing?
So in the near term, there's been, as I'm sure you've been reporting, this scramble for other sources of gas and fossil fuels. But really longer term, it's all about accelerating the clean energy transition, which Europe has already been in progress for some time. So that's where all the focus has been going now. So, I mean, gas is mainly used for power generation, in industry, and in buildings, in heating. So at least heating and power, the solutions already exist today. So it's all about accelerating the deployment of renewable power generation, installation of heat pumps. These are the kinds of things that the countries are really focused on, or at least should be focused on.
Simple supply demand. If the price of gasoline and nat gas and electricity is low, there's very little incentive to invest in renewables. Look, I understand the climate change argument, but if the price of gas and electricity is very low, if there's no money involved, people aren't going to invest in these renewable energies. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? You want the price of electricity to be high so that people will invest in renewables?
Yes, yeah, it is tricky, and that's why there's been so much debate within Europe about things like price caps, gas price caps, power price, help with power prices, because a high price signal does reduce demand and does also accelerate this transition.
All right, Arjun, Flora, really appreciate your analysis on this. This is a super big topic, and of course, it will continue in the months to come as we move through winter. Thank you.